Have you ever gotten together with a group of people and just done some remembering? You remember, you reminisce about the past and the moments of things that happened, the good, the bad, the funny, the sad. I know whenever we get together with friends from college, I find that most of what we do is just talk about when we were in college. But it's a way for us to remember experiences that we've had. My kids, they love looking at videos of themselves when they were kids, and then they'll like to tell me, oh, I remember when I did this. And I go, well, you don't really remember it. You just think you do because you've seen the video enough times that you are like, oh, I remember that. But there's something about stories being passed down that cause people to remember things. And now, because of memories, then we can associate certain things in the moment with things from the past. So for example, there's this particular toy that anytime I see this toy, this is all I think about. You can't super tell in the video, but she is sticking her tongue out, and the thing is whacking around and hitting her tongue. And that's my youngest daughter, Isabella, and she thought it was the most fantastic thing in the entire world. So now, anytime I see those spinny toys, I'm like, oh my gosh, remember when you used to, use your tongue to whack it? I don't know, it's so strange. Also now, anytime I think about going to the store and whether or not I should bring my kids with me to the store, I have this memory. Yeah, any other parents? Yeah, never take the kids to the store. Just don't do it. At that age. Now they're a little bit better. But when we have these moments that we connect and associate to past experiences, it helps us to remember and to remember what has happened. And when we read the Bible, so this is like real people, real stories. So we are looking back and remembering it, but people in this time are also remembering stories back, either from what somebody told them or something that they experienced. And so as we head into the book of John, again, chapter 6, we're going to see some of this looking back at the past experiences and how some of the stories that we're looking at today, how they would have remembered something from the past because of what was happening right then. And we're going to just jump into things because there is a lot to talk about this morning. At the end of chapter 5, since we haven't been there for a couple weeks, at the end of chapter 5, Jesus, he was speaking about Moses. And he was speaking about how Moses was writing about him, was writing about Jesus. And what he says at the end of chapter 5, I don't think I have it as a slide up there, is he says, 5:46, if you believed Moses, you would believe me, for he wrote about me. So Jesus is saying, Moses is talking about me. Now, where is this? One of the places we see this is in Deuteronomy 18:15. It's there on your notes. The Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from among you. From your fellow Israelites, you must listen to him. So Jesus is saying, this is me that Moses is writing about. He is referencing himself as the new prophet. Jesus is saying, I am this new prophet that Moses was talking about. So that's an important context for us to have as we get into this. So, chapter 6, verse 1. Sometime after this, Jesus crossed to the far shore of the Sea of Galilee, that is, the Sea of Tiberias. And a great crowd of people followed him because they saw the signs he had performed by healing the sick. We're going to stop there just for a quick minute. John, in the book of John, he uses the word sign instead of miracle to reference miraculous things that Jesus does. And part of why John uses the word signs is because these signs or these miracles that Jesus does, they're not just about that actual miracle. They are a symbol, they are a sign that points to something greater about who Jesus is. So we always need to kind of, in the book of John, when miracles happen and signs happen, we have to look a little bit about like, okay, so this is what happened, but now, what are you really trying to get at, Jesus? But these signs were attractive to people, and so they're following him. Continuing on, verse 3, then Jesus went up on a mountainside and sat down with his disciples, and the Jewish Passover festival was near. Stopping there for a minute. The Jewish Passover festival. So the Jewish Passover festival, it retells the Exodus story. This is the story when God brought the Israelites out of slavery from Egypt. He provided for them, he supplied food for them, he rescued them through parting of waters. And so it's important that any time we have moments where there's controlling of water or there's this concept of eating and being fed, that it's linked to this Passover festival idea. At the same time, anytime this Jewish Passover festival came around, it also was remembering that God delivered the Israelites from the oppressors through the hands of Moses from Egypt at that time. And so it gives them hope every year at the Passover festival as they remember back to that moment. It gives them hope for the new prophet who's going to come and deliver them from the Roman Empire. Are you starting to see how some of these connections are happening? The past to what's happening today. So this is all this context that John is trying to set up before we really get into the meat of these signs and miracles. So we're going to get into that right now. Verse 5. Probably a familiar story. When Jesus looked up and saw a great crowd coming toward him, he said to Philip, "Where shall we buy bread for these people to eat?" He asked this only to test him, for he already had in mind what he was going to do. Philip answered him, "It would take more than half a year's wages to buy enough bread for each one to have a bite." Another of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, spoke up. "Here is a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish, but how far will they go among so many?" Jesus said, "Have the people sit down." There was plenty of grass in that place, and they sat down. About 5,000 men were there. Jesus then took the loaves, gave thanks, and distributed to those who were seated as much as they wanted. He did the same with the fish. When they had all had enough to eat, he said to his disciples, "Gather the pieces that are left over. Let nothing be wasted." So they gathered them and filled 12 baskets with the pieces of the 5 barley loaves left over by those who had eaten. We'll stop right there. So this is known as the feeding of the 5,000. And this actually is the only miracle of Jesus that is in all 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the 4 books that talk about the life of Jesus. This story is in all of those. So John has a unique take of what he's wanting to highlight for this particular section. And I'm just going to say at the forefront right now that there is so much in this text, so much that you can unpack. And so I am honestly barely going to scratch the surface. You have to think about it like an iceberg, right? We're going to talk about the tip of the iceberg. There is a whole big old iceberg underneath this passage. So dig into it later on. Ask me more. Ask any of the pastors more about it later on. But just I know, we're not going to hit on everything, so I'm just telling you now. So one of the unique takes that John has is that he shows that Jesus is the one who initiates the question about where to buy bread from. And part of that is because he asks this leading, testing, probing question of Philip. And Philip, in his very human, practical response, gives a calculated, strategic, human answer. And he's just crunching all the numbers of how much it's going to take. And as you read it, at least as I read it, you begin to sense Philip's despair. And you begin to sense a little bit of his doubt and his hopelessness, right? The math isn't mathin'. Isn't that what the kids say these days? The math is not mathin'. It's not going to work. And Andrew, he maybe brought this kid, but he really was like, how's this going to work, right? They have this very human idea of how this is going to happen. Jesus knew. He knew that the disciples weren't going to be able to feed all these people. He knew that. So why did he ask them? Why did he test them? Why did he probe then this question? Well, because Jesus wanted to see how much the disciples understood about who Jesus was. Do you know me? Do you know what I am capable of? Do you trust me? He wanted to give them a glimpse into a powerful, creative, thoughtful miracle that was going to take place. But rather than seeing and understanding the possibilities of what Jesus could do, they just were like, not going to happen. So hopeless, so much despair, so much doubt. When we make assumptions about what God is able to do based on our human limitations, then we miss out on the abundance that Jesus is going to give. And there was a huge abundance, right? So not only does Jesus feed 5,000 men who were present there, there are women and children that are there as well, thousands more people, and everyone had enough to eat. Everyone had enough to eat. And then, to not waste anything, Jesus probably was going to be like a big composter person, to not waste. I love that detail of that John puts in there, to not waste. They picked it all up. How many? 12 basketfuls. Oh, that was more than what we started with in the beginning. So a huge abundance that Jesus gave and showed. Now, the people who were there, they're like, yeah, this is food, an abundance of food. Literally, they are just like, we are being fed food. But the sign, the miracle that is pointing to something bigger is actually going to take place a little bit further in the chapter. So we're going to just do a little bit of a taste of it. Ooh, taste, literally. I didn't even mean to say that, but taste. And Pastor Dave, next week, he's going to talk more about this, so make sure to come back for it. But later on in chapter 6, Jesus says, I am the bread of life. And so he starts to talk about how he is the one that gives life. He's the one who's going to sustain them, to give life to their souls, to their being, to their entirety. And so if Jesus' life is the one that brings life and abundance to people, then all he really wants for his disciples in that moment, and all he really wants for you, if you call yourself a disciple today, all he wants is your willingness to offer yourself to him so that you can experience an abundant life. That's all he wants. The abundance Jesus offers comes from offering yourself to him. Or another way to say this is that your willingness to be used by God, your willingness to give God whatever it is that you have, is what's going to allow you to experience the abundance that Jesus wants to offer you. Philip, he didn't offer anything. And if we offer nothing to God, he's not going to have anything to use. Because what happens is we limit God by assuming that what we have is not enough. I don't have enough money. I don't have enough resources. I don't have enough connections. I don't have the right car. I don't have the greatest strategies. I don't have a specific gift. I don't have the right shoe size. I don't have. But what you do have, what you have and what you will always have that nobody can take away from you is your willingness. Your willingness to bring yourself. You get to choose if you are going to say, I want you to use me. Whatever that is. Your shoe size and all. He wants to use you. So Jesus provides this abundance of food. Now, our context, thinking about the people, who they are, what they would have connected this back to, it would be when the Israelites were coming out of Egypt, right? So they're in the desert, they're complaining, they're grumbling, they're filled with doubt, despair, hopelessness. Sound familiar? Then God provides. He provides bread, and it says in Exodus 16, everyone had as much as they needed. So there's this association, there's a connection, and a remembrance when people are experiencing being fed by Jesus in this moment and being provided bread. There's this connection of, oh, this is like when God provided bread in Exodus through Moses. So what happens? Verse 14. After the people saw the sign Jesus performed, they began to say, surely this is the prophet who is to come into the world. Jesus, knowing that they intended to come and make him king by force, withdrew again to a mountain by himself. So Jesus was the one they expected to be like the prophet Moses. They would have connected these signs and been like, oh, you are the hope. You are our kingly Messiah that's going to deliver us from the hands of the Romans. But their way of understanding what this might mean for Jesus to be king was very different than what it meant for Jesus to be king. They had this expectation that he was going to have an earthly crown, be a miracle worker, a military revolutionist. How often do we try to fit Jesus into what we want things to look like? This earthly way of something happening. See, the truth of who Jesus is, it doesn't always align with our expectations. And we have to be careful to not allow our experiences of God to become expectations we have of God. I'm going to say that again. We have to be careful to not allow our experiences with God to become expectations that we have of God. Now, the truth is that Jesus, he wants to give you life. You can always expect that Jesus wants to give you life. The truth is that Jesus is good and loving. You can expect that Jesus is always going to be good and always going to be loving. But that doesn't mean that Jesus is going to do whatever it is that you want Jesus to do. And it doesn't mean that things are going to look the way that you want them to look. And it doesn't mean that the outcomes are going to be the outcomes that you want them to be. And it doesn't mean that things are going to happen the way that they happened, that you say, well, I remember it this way. Well, that is how it happened that way. That doesn't mean it's going to happen that way every single time. The crowd, they thought they knew who Jesus was because they were looking for a king. They were looking for the new prophet, and they were like, well, this is what happened with Moses. And so, of course, that's going to be how it will happen with Jesus. But what Jesus reveals as the true king, because Jesus is king, as the true king, was not what they expected. Nowhere on their bingo card did they have, our king is going to die. But Jesus' life and death and resurrection was the unexpected that we all needed. And so when we lay down our expectations, when we lay down our plans, it's saying, what I think might be best, actually, I'm going to trust Jesus that you have better. That you have better. All right, we're going to finish out this last section. So Jesus, knowing they had all these expectations of him, is like, I'm out. Peace out. I wish anytime people had expectations of me, I would be like, peace out, I'm going to go have some solo time. Nope. You're expecting me to feed you dinner. Bye. Just kidding. I feed my kids dinner. But he took off. And then his disciples, with their 12 baskets, are left. And so what happens? Well, it says, when evening came, his disciples went down to the lake, where they got into a boat and set off across the lake for Capernaum. By now it was dark, and Jesus had not yet joined them. A strong wind was blowing, and the waters grew rough. When they had rowed about 3 or 4 miles, they saw Jesus approaching the boat, walking on the water, and they were frightened. But he said to them, "It is I. Don't be afraid." Then they were willing to take him into the boat, and immediately the boat reached the shore where they were heading. So we have this chaotic situation for the disciples. They are rowing in the boats. They're frightened. They have no clue where they are. And in the middle of this lake, we're probably thinking about this Exodus story. The Israelites began their journey to freedom by coming through the Red Sea that God parted, right? At the hand of Moses, parted the Red Sea, the Israelites crossed on foot, and then when they went after them, all the waters raged, and they made it free. God also, in Exodus 3:14, said to Moses, "I am who I am." This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you. So the disciples, they don't know Jesus is coming. They just know there are some crazy, uncontrollable waters that are happening. And honestly, based on what happened with the feeding of the 5,000, they probably didn't think Jesus was going to help them at all because they don't realize Jesus can do these miraculous things at this time. They didn't realize that. But then they hear, "It is I. Don't be afraid." Now, in light of this larger context of the Exodus story and this parallel that John keeps drawing to the Exodus story, and with what comes after this when Jesus proclaims that he is the bread of life, the way that this phrase, "it is I," can be translated is to the divine name, I am. And so this is Jesus identifying himself as the presence of God. In these uncontrollable waters, he is saying, I am. When Moses had fear and doubt and had no clue what he was going to do, God said, I am is with you. The disciples, when they're facing the chaos and the storms, Jesus comes and says, I am is with you. The Israelites, they were delivered through the Red Sea, and then Jesus immediately, it says, immediately the boat reached the shore where they were headed. He delivered them from the chaos, uncontrolled waters. Even in the storms, the presence of Jesus brings a great sense of peace. Even in the storms, the presence of the I am, God I am, brings peace. Just like the disciples who invited Jesus into the boat, when you invite Jesus into the challenges of your life, when you invite Jesus into the pain of whatever it is that you're experiencing, when you invite Jesus into the chaos that's happening, he will gladly step in, and he will happily say, I am here. Do not be afraid. His presence, the presence of the great I am, becomes peace in the chaos. The presence of the great I am can control the uncontrollable waters, and it can control the uncontrollable chaos in our world and in our lives. So as we take a step back and we look at everything, there's this parallel to the Exodus story, a reminder of the freedom, the provision, and the deliverance that God brought. The signs that Jesus did here with the feeding of the 5,000 and walking away from the expectations of others and controlling the sea. This is the new prophet bringing freedom and provision and deliverance. Jesus gives abundant life. Jesus, he lives out the claims of what he says he is, the truth of who he claims to be. He lives that out, and he brings peace. He gives life. If I were to summarize a main point for all this, it's simply Jesus saying, know me, be with me, trust me, invite me in to your life. Know me, know that I can feed 5,000. Trust me, trust that I can do the impossible. Know me, and my will and passion and desires for your life are going to be so good. Trust me in that. Know that when you invite me into your life, I can bring peace and comfort in the chaos that is going on. The disciples, the crowd, in this moment here, they missed out on that. They missed out on that Jesus because they gave into doubt, despair, hopelessness, fear, confusion, misunderstanding. Don't miss out on Jesus today. You have the choice. You have the willingness to say, I want to know you. I want to be with you. I want to trust you, and I want to invite you into my life. So I'm going to ask the worship team to come up. And it's all that easy and all that hard. We can say, the main point is to know Jesus, to be with Jesus. But sometimes we go, I know Jesus. How am I supposed to know Jesus more? Or maybe you're like, I don't know. How do I know Jesus? So I wanted to leave you with a practical, simple practice as a way for you to be present with Jesus, a way for you to invite Jesus into the everyday, ordinary moments of your life, a way for you to be with Jesus. And it's called a breath prayer. Breath prayers are short, simple, scriptural prayers that you say while breathing in and breathing out. And so the first part of a breath prayer, you breathe in on the inhale, and the second part of the breath prayer, you breathe out on the exhale. And we're talking about remembrance. We remember to breathe without thinking about it. We just breathe. And so breath prayers can actually become a way where we can be with Jesus and connect with Jesus. And the more that we practice it and the more that we do it, our breath and those prayers become a way for us to connect with Jesus that we don't even have to think about it anymore. Man, when I'm driving and somebody cuts me off, I just go, "Not my will, God, your will be done." When my kids throw a big tantrum in the middle of Costco, "You are the best father. Help me to be a good mother." You know, it becomes a way that you can be present and invite Jesus into these moments, and so that you can experience more of Jesus. And so what I want us to do is I put 3 examples here that are connected to the 3 points, the 3 sections that we looked at from our text today. And what I would like to invite you to do is to just pick one of those that you feel like you are connecting with this morning. And the great thing about breath prayers is you can pick any scripture. You can even, create your own. If you want more ideas, email me. I have tons of resources of this to give to you. But for this morning, I want you to pick one. One of these that connects with maybe the idea or the truth that you most need to have Jesus settle into you. And so as it looks at offering oneself and the idea of experiencing abundance, the breath prayer is abide in me and I in you. And at first glance, it might be like, well, what does that have to do with offering oneself? Well, this scripture comes from John 15, when Jesus says, "You must abide in me and I in you, because apart from me, you can do nothing. And that when you abide in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit." And so if you want to experience fruit and abundance of Jesus, really it's just about abiding in Jesus and being with Jesus. So maybe that's your breath prayer for this morning. Maybe you realize, I have a lot of expectations of Jesus. I have a lot of plans that Jesus needs to make sure are set in the way that I want them to be. And so you are like, I need to let that go. And so your breath prayer is not my will, but yours be done. This is like a daily breath prayer for me. Not my will, but yours be done. And the last, maybe you're in a season, I've been there, that you feel like you are barely breathing, that you are trying to grasp at something. There's so much chaos and turmoil going on. And for you, it just is a reminder of the words that Jesus spoke from our text. You are with me, I will not be afraid. You are with me, I will not be afraid. So as we move into a time of reflection, as we move into a time of being with Jesus, I'm going to invite you to say one of these breath prayers. And the thing about breath prayers is that you don't move around from one prayer to a next prayer. You pick one, and you continue to say that over and over and over as you breathe, so that it becomes part of how you live. It comes out of your heart, out of your mind, out of your breath. So I'm going to guide us through this, and then after that, Phil and the team, they're going to begin a time of musical worship. But I want to invite you and give you permission that if you would like to continue to just sit in a time of breathing and praying with Jesus, to do that. And when you are ready to enter into singing and worship, feel free to do that. There's also people, like always, in the back who would happily pray for you. So if you would like to do that, you can go back there as well. But I'm going to pray for us, and then I'm going to help lead us through practicing this breath prayer this morning. So let's pray together. God, we thank you that you want to know us, that you want to be with us, and that you invite us to know you and to be with you. So God, in this moment, I just pray that you would give people a sense of your peaceful presence, and that they would feel free to close their eyes and to just start slowly breathing. Something that we just don't even have to think about, but to just begin to notice a little bit the breath that comes in, an inhale and an exhale, and that you would help us to slow it down, that you would help us to slow our breath down enough to become aware of your presence. And that as we breathe, God, we want to know you. And we trust that one of the ways for us to know you is to pray, is to talk to you. And so help us in this moment as we begin to pray a simple prayer, that it would be a prayer that goes deep into our heart and into our being. So much so that when we walk around, we don't even have to think about this as a truth in our lives. So I just want to invite you right now that on your next inhale to just say the first part of the prayer that you are saying in your mind, and then on the exhale to pray the second part. And then continue to do that on each inhale to say, abide in me, and on the exhale, and I in you, if that's your prayer. And continue to stick with the same prayer for each moment. And you can take slower breaths as you settle in. On an inhale, it's not my will. On an exhale, that your will would be done, God. God, thank you that you are with us, that you love us. Help us to continue to be present and attentive to you. And so invite us into whatever space that you want that to look like right now, God. May you continue to guide us and lead us as we pray, as we worship, as we sit with you, to know you, to be with you, to trust you, and to invite you into every part of our lives.